I was sitting in a lawyer's office on Peachtree Street in downtown Atlanta, my hands ice cold in my lap, my heart slamming so hard I could feel it in my throat when my husband looked me dead in the eye and said,
"Go ahead and cry, Rochelle. Cry all you want. When we walk out of here, everything your grandmother built and this belongs to me."
His mother, Vivian, was sitting right next to him.
"We already won, sweetheart."
She patted his arm and smiled at me, the kind of smile that says, and for a moment, sitting across from the man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years, the man I'd trusted with my whole life, I felt something crack inside my chest, like the last thread holding me together just snapped. But then Attorney Lorraine Prescott reached across her desk and picked up a sealed envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed, with my grandmother's handwriting on the front. Just my name. Rochelle. She slid her finger under the seal, and the smile on my husband's face died, slowly, like someone turning down a dimmer switch. What was inside that envelope wasn't just a document. It was something none of us expected. Not Terrence, not Vivian, not even me. And by the time it was over, the only person left begging in that room was him. Before I tell you this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, because trust me, you're going to want to hear every single second of this. But to understand how we ended up in that room, I need to take you back to where it all started. I grew up in Cascade Heights on the southwest side of Atlanta. If you know the area, you know it's one of those neighborhoods where Black families built something real brick homes with big porches, oak trees lining the streets, and the kind of neighbors who'd bring you a plate before you even asked. My grandmother, Odessa Mae Whitmore, bought her house on Lyndhurst Drive in 1979, paid cash. Every single dollar earned from 31 years of nursing at Grady Memorial Hospital. She used to tell me that story every time we sat on the front porch together.
Rochelle, I walked into that closing office with an envelope full of money and a prayer, walked out with a deed in my hand and tears on my face. Ain't nobody gave me nothing. I built this.
That house was more than wood and brick to her. It was proof that a Black woman from Macon, Georgia, with nothing but a nursing diploma and a stubborn spirit could own something permanent in this world. Grandma Odessa raised me from the time I was 6. My mother, her only daughter, passed from ovarian cancer when I was barely old enough to remember her face. I have fragments the smell of cocoa butter, a laugh that filled up a room hands braiding my hair on a Sunday morning. But mostly, I have Grandma Odessa. She was my mother, my father, my best friend, and my backbone all wrapped into one. She pushed me hard. Every report card, every science fair, every college application. She was right there reading over my shoulder saying,
Rochelle Elaine, you are going to be somebody. And not because a man makes you somebody, because you make you somebody.
I listened. I went to Xavier University of Louisiana for pre-pharmacy, then got my Doctor of Pharmacy from Mercer University right here in Atlanta. Graduated with honors. Got a position as a clinical pharmacist at Grady Memorial, the same hospital where my grandmother had spent her whole career. The day I walked through those doors with my white coat and my badge, Grandma Odessa stood in the parking lot and cried. She said,
"Your mama's watching baby, I know she is."
I was 26 then. Life felt like it was exactly where it was supposed to be. And then I met Terrence Darnell Holloway. It was at a 4th of July cookout at my coworker's house in College Park. He was standing by the grill laughing with a group of guys wearing a simple white polo and jeans. Tall, clean cut, smile that could light up a whole backyard. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He was just warm. He walked over to me, handed me a plate he'd already fixed ribs, corn, coleslaw, and said,
"I don't know what you like, but I figured nobody should be standing at a cookout empty-handed."
I laughed. He laughed. And something just clicked. Terrence was a construction supervisor for a mid-size firm in Decatur, made good money, drove a clean truck, had his own apartment. He told me he grew up in Memphis, moved to Atlanta for work, and was close to his mother, Vivian, who still lived back in Tennessee. He talked about her like she was a saint.
"My mama sacrificed everything for me and my brother Dwayne. I owe that woman my life."
I thought that was beautiful. A man who loved his mother. What could go wrong? We dated for 2 years. He was attentive. Showed up when he said he would. Brought me flowers on random Tuesdays. cooked for me, and I mean really cooked. Smothered pork chops, garlic mashed potatoes, collard greens with smoked turkey. He'd stand in my kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder and say,
"Sit down, baby. Let me take care of you tonight."
but the thing that made me fall completely was how he treated Grandma Odessa. He'd drive across town on Saturday mornings just to check on her, fix the leaky faucet she'd been complaining about for months, replace the rotten boards on her back porch, sat with her on Sundays and listened to her stories about the old days at Grady. Grandma Odessa would look at me after he left and say,
He's a good one, Rochelle. Got strong hands and a gentle way.
but I noticed something she never said. She never said,
He's the one.
Looking back now, that silence was louder than anything she ever spoke. We got married on a Saturday afternoon in October at a small church in Cascade Heights. 60 guests. Yellow roses, Grandma Odessa's favorite. I wore my mother's pearl earrings that Grandma had kept in a velvet box for 20 years. Terrence's family came down from Memphis. His brother Dwayne, quiet, polite, kept to himself mostly. And Vivian. Now I want to be fair. When I first met Vivian Holloway, she was charming, stylish, always dressed like she was going somewhere important. She hugged me tight at the wedding and said,
I'm so happy my son found a woman with a good head on her shoulders.
but then during the reception, she said something that everybody laughed at, but nobody really heard. She raised her glass and said,
Welcome to the family, honey. Now everything is shared right.
She winked. People chuckled. Terrence kissed my cheek. I smiled and let it go. My best friend, Tamika Sellers, we call her Mika, was standing right next to me. She didn't laugh. She leaned in and whispered,
I'm not saying he's bad, Chell. I'm just saying, watch how his mama looks at your grandma's house. She measured the square footage with her eyes before she measured the love in this room.
I told Mika she was being dramatic, that Vivian was just proud of her son, that it was a good day and I wasn't going to let anyone's paranoia ruin it. Mika nodded, sipped her champagne, and said,
I hope you're right, girl. I really do.
She wasn't being dramatic. Mika saw something I refused to see. She saw the way Vivian's eyes lingered a little too long on the property, the way she asked just a few too many questions about the neighborhood, about the lot on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard that Grandma Odessa also owned a commercial lot worth more than most people's retirement savings. And by the time I finally opened my eyes, it was almost too late. The first 3 years of our marriage were good. Not perfect. No marriage is but good in the way that makes you believe you chose right. We bought a little 3-bedroom house in East Point about 15 minutes from Grandma Odessa's place. Nothing fancy. 1,400 square feet, a small backyard, a kitchen that was too narrow for 2 people, but we made it work anyway. Every Sunday, Terrence and I had a tradition. We'd cook together. He'd handle the meat, usually something on the grill or a roast in the oven, and I'd do the sides. Mac and cheese from scratch, candied yams, cornbread. We'd put on old Frankie Beverly and Mays, and for a few hours the world outside didn't exist. Just us, the music, and the smell of garlic and butter filling up the house. Those Sundays were everything to me. I held on to them like a lifeline. Because even then, somewhere deep in a part of myself, I wasn't ready to listen to something felt like it was slowly shifting. Grandma Odessa started slowing down about 1.5 years into our marriage. She was 78, still sharp as a tack mentally, but her body was getting tired. Her doctor at Emory diagnosed her with congestive heart failure stage 2. Manageable. But it meant medications, dietary changes, regular checkups, and someone keeping a close eye on her. That someone was me. I'd go to her house after my shifts at Grady, sometimes still in my scrubs, and sit with her in the kitchen while she sipped her low-sodium broth and complained about how it tasted like
Hot water with regret.
She hated the diet restrictions, hated being told what she couldn't eat, but she'd do it because I asked her to.
I'm only doing this for you, Rochelle.
She'd say, pointing her spoon at me.
Don't think for a second I enjoy this.
Terrence came with me at first. He'd check on the house, tighten a loose hinge, take out the trash. But after a few months, the visits got shorter, then less frequent. Then he'd just drop me off and say,
Call me when you're ready.
I told myself he was busy with work, construction projects running long, over time. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. But then came the question. We were lying in bed one night, the room dark, the ceiling fan humming, and Terrence said it like he was asking about the weather.
So what's going to happen with the house when you know when your grandma passes...
I turned and looked at him. What?
I'm just asking Rochelle. It's a natural question. That house is worth something, the lot on MLK, too. We should be thinking ahead.
My stomach tightened. She's not gone yet, Terrence. She's right here, and I'm not having this conversation.
All right. I'm just being practical, that's all.
He put his hands up. I rolled over and closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. Not for a long time. That was the first crack. Small, barely visible, like a hairline fracture in a foundation you think is solid. You can ignore it. You can paint over it. But it's there. And it's spreading. Around that same time, Vivian started visiting more often. She'd fly in from Memphis every few weeks, always with a gift for Grandma Odessa. A shawl, a tin of butter cookies, a devotional book. She'd sit in the living room with Grandma and talk about the Lord, about family, about how...
We all need to take care of each other.
But I noticed something. Every visit, Vivian would find a reason to wander through the house alone.
Just looking for the bathroom, honey. I was trying to find a vase for these flowers.
One time I came out of the kitchen and found her in Grandma Odessa's bedroom, standing by the dresser, the top drawer slightly open.
I was just admiring this beautiful jewelry box.
Vivian said, smiling.
Your grandmother has such lovely things.
I smiled back, but my chest felt tight. Grandma Odessa noticed too. One evening after Vivian and Terrence had left, she called me into her bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her Bible on the nightstand, her reading glasses on her nose.
Rochelle, come sit with me.
I sat. She took my hand.
Baby, I've already taken care of everything. The house, the lot on MLK. My savings, it's all handled. When the time comes, you go see Lorraine Prescott. She's my attorney. Been my attorney for 15 years. Promise me you'll go to her and nobody else.
Grandma, why are you talking like this?
Because I didn't work 51 years to leave my grandbaby unprotected. Promise me, Rochelle.
I promise. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could have sworn she wanted to say something else. Something about Terrence. Something about Vivian. But she just kissed my forehead and said,
Good, now go home and get some rest.
I didn't understand then. I thought she was just being thorough the way old folks are always making sure their affairs are in order. I didn't realize she was building a fortress around me. A fortress I wouldn't even know existed until the day I needed it most. 2 months later, on a Sunday morning in March, I drove to Grandma Odessa's house to bring her breakfast. Turkey, sausage, scrambled egg whites, wheat toast, her prison food, she called it. I let myself in with my key, set the tray on the kitchen counter, and walked to her bedroom. She was lying in bed, peaceful, still. The Bible open on her chest, her reading glasses still on. My grandmother, Odessa Mae Whitmore, had passed in her sleep. Quietly, gently, the way she lived. I sat on the floor next to her bed and held her hand for 45 minutes before I called anyone. I just needed that time. Just me and her one last time in the house she built with her own 2 hands. When I finally called Terrence, he said all the right things.
I'm so sorry, baby. I'll be right there.
And he was. He held me. He handled the arrangements. He was everything I needed him to be. But looking back now, I know the truth. The man who held me while I sobbed over my grandmother's body had already started calculating what he could take from her. 3 weeks later, Grandma Odessa was laid to rest at Greenwood Cemetery. Half the neighborhood came. The choir sang, "His eye is on the sparrow." I couldn't get through my eulogy without breaking down twice. And during the repast, while I was in the church kitchen trying to hold myself together, my cousin Nadine pulled me aside. Her face looked troubled. "Shell, I don't want to upset you today of all days, but I need to tell you something." She glanced toward the fellowship hall. During the service, I stepped outside to get some air, and I heard Terrence on the phone behind the building. He was talking to his mama. "Okay." He said, "Mama, the house is ours now. We just got to play this right." My blood went cold. But I was burying my grandmother. I couldn't process it. Not that day. So I folded Nadine's words up, tucked them into a corner of my mind, and walked back into the repast with a smile on my face. If only I had listened. If only I had let that moment crack me open right then and there instead of sealing it shut. But grief makes you do that. It makes you hold everything in, because if you let one thing out, you're afraid it'll all come flooding. And the flood was coming. I just didn't know it yet. Grief has a way of making you vulnerable in places you didn't even know were soft. And in the weeks after Grandma Odessa's passing, I was nothing but soft. I cried in the shower. I cried in my car in the Grady parking garage before my shifts. I cried folding laundry when I found one of her old scarves that had somehow ended up in my things, lavender and cream still smelling like her Palmer's cocoa butter. Terrence was patient for about 10 days. On day 11, we were eating dinner, leftover baked chicken rice, green beans, and he set his fork down and looked at me like he was about to discuss a business proposal.
So, when do we meet with the lawyer about the estate?
I blinked. What?
The estate, Rochelle. Your grandmother's house, the lot, whatever savings she had. We need to get on top of this.
Yes,
we. I'm your husband. This is our future we're talking about.
His jaw tightened, just slightly. I didn't answer. I just stared at the man sitting across from me, and for the first time I felt something cold crawl through my stomach. Not sadness. Something else. Something I couldn't name yet. I remembered Grandma Odessa's words. Lorraine Prescott. Nobody else. So I called Attorney Prescott's office the next morning. Her assistant was warm professional, said Mrs. Prescott had been expecting my call. We scheduled a meeting for the following Tuesday, just me and the attorney, a preliminary consultation. When I told Terrence I had a meeting with the estate lawyer, he nodded. But when I told him it was just me, his whole demeanor changed.
What do you mean, just you?
She said the first meeting is just with the beneficiary. Standard procedure.
Standard procedure, Rochelle. We're married. What's yours is mine. That's how this works.
He stood up from the couch. Terrence, it's just a first meeting. I'll tell you everything after. He paced the living room, rubbing the back of his neck. Then he stopped, looked at me, and said something I'll never forget.
You think because your grandma left you some old house, you're better than me, baby. You're nothing without me managing things for you. You think you can handle an estate. You count pills for a living, Rochelle. You don't know the first thing about property, about real money.
The words hit me like a slap. My hands went still in my lap, my throat closed up. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was sit there and let the sting settle into my chest like a bruise forming under skin. He must have seen it on my face because he softened, sat back down, took my hand.
Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. I'm just stressed, baby. I want to make sure we're protected, both of us, that's all.
I nodded, but something had shifted. Something I couldn't unshift. I went to the meeting alone. Attorney Lorraine Prescott's office was in a small professional building on West Paces Ferry Road. Quiet, elegant bookshelves lining every wall. She was a woman in her early 60s, silver hair, cropped close reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and a handshake firm enough to let you know she didn't play.
Your grandmother was one of the most deliberate women I ever met,
Lorraine said, settling into her chair.
She didn't leave anything to chance. But I'll get into the details at our next full meeting. For now, I want you to know everything she built for you. And she made very sure of that.
She looked at me over her glasses.
Very sure.
I didn't fully understand what she meant. Not yet. But something in her tone told me there was more to this story than a house and a lot. That night I got home late. Terrence was in the living room watching ESPN laptop open on the coffee table. He barely looked up when I walked in.
How'd it go?
Fine, she said there's a process. She'll schedule a full reading soon.
Good, make sure I'm there for that one.
I went to the bedroom to change. His laptop was still open on the coffee table, and I know I shouldn't have looked. I know. But something pulled me. Maybe it was Nadine's words from the repast. Maybe it was the way Terrence had spoken to me earlier. Maybe it was just instinct, but I walked back out, glanced at the screen, and saw his email was open. The most recent message was sent to Vivian Holloway. Subject line, estate plan. I looked toward the living room. He was in the kitchen now getting water. I had maybe 30 seconds. I clicked. The email was dated 2 days after Grandma Odessa's funeral. 2 days. The body wasn't even cold in the ground.
Mama, I looked it up. The house on Lyndhurst is probably worth around $485,000 based on recent sales in Cascade Heights. The lot on MLK could go for $320,000 easy, maybe more with the way that corridor is developing. We need to make sure her name isn't the only one on the deed. I'm going to talk to her about adding me. If she pushes back, I'll get Keith involved. Don't worry, I got this.
My hands were shaking so bad I could barely scroll. My vision blurred. I felt like the floor was tilting underneath me. Keith. Who was Keith? I heard the faucet turn off. I stepped back from the laptop, walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands pressed against my mouth. $485,000. $320,000. He had the numbers. He had a plan. He had his mother. And he had someone named Keith. My grandmother's body had barely settled into the earth, and my husband was already dividing what she'd left behind like it was a business deal. When Terrence came to bed that night, he kissed my forehead and said,
Get some rest, baby. Big week ahead.
I lay in the dark, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan going around and around. My mind doing the same thing, going around and around, replaying every moment, every word, every look. The next morning, I confronted him. Gently, carefully. I told him I'd accidentally seen the email. He didn't flinch.
Rochelle, you're reading too much into it. I was just doing research. For us, for our financial future, that's what husbands do.
You emailed your mother a breakdown of my grandmother's property values 2 days after her funeral, Terrence.
So I'm supposed to just ignore it. Somebody has to think about the future because you're too busy crying to see straight.
I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what do you say to that? What do you say to someone who turns your grief into weakness and your dead grandmother's legacy into a spreadsheet? I wanted to believe him. God knows I did. I wanted to believe that the man I married was just being practical, just being responsible, just being a husband. But 2 days later, I found something that made the email look like nothing. I found the business card on a Wednesday morning. Terrence had left for work early and I was gathering his clothes for the laundry, something I'd done 1,000 times without thinking. But this time, when I checked the pocket of his gray work jacket, my fingers closed around a small white card. Bradley, Kincaid Esquire Family Law and Estate Litigation. There was a handwritten note on the back. Call me Tuesday. We'll go over the spousal claim options. Spousal claim options. My husband had hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, an estate litigation attorney. Behind my back. While I was still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for my grandmother's voice. While I was still driving to Lyndhurst Drive on autopilot before remembering she wasn't there anymore. He was building a legal case to take what she left me. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at that card for 15 minutes. My hands were trembling. Not from sadness this time, from something sharper, something that tasted like metal in the back of my throat. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Something told me to wait, to watch, to pay attention the way I should have been paying attention all along. And the more I watched, the more I saw. The first thing I noticed was the money. I logged into our joint savings account, something I hadn't checked in weeks because honestly, finances were the last thing on my mind. The balance stopped me cold. We'd had $54,000 in that account. Now it showed $31,000. $23,000 gone. I called the bank. They confirmed 3 separate withdrawals over the past month, $8,000, $7,500, and $7,500, all from Terrence's linked debit card. When I asked him about it that evening, keeping my voice as steady as I could, he didn't even look up from his plate.
I invested it.
Invested it where?
In the business, Rochelle, equipment materials. You wouldn't understand.
$23,000, Terrence, without telling me.
Last time I checked, my name is on that account too. I don't need permission to use my own money.
He finally looked up. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I pressed my nails into my palms under the table and said nothing. That weekend, Vivian flew in from Memphis. She said it was to check on me after losing Grandma Odessa. She brought a peach cobbler and a sympathy card, sat at my kitchen table, held my hand, and said,
We're family, Rochelle. We take care of each other.
Then on Saturday evening, I was coming down the hallway to the kitchen when I heard Vivian's voice. Low, almost whispering, but not low enough.
The lot on MLK alone is worth more than everything I own in Memphis, Terrence. We can't let her just sit on it. She doesn't know what to do with property like that.
And then she said it. The words that branded themselves into my memory.
Sweetheart, let the men handle the money. She's a pharmacist, not a businesswoman. She wouldn't last a day without my son.
I pressed my back against the hallway wall, closed my eyes, felt my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones I hadn't taken off since the funeral, pressing against my neck like a reminder. But Vivian wasn't finished. Her voice dropped even lower, but I caught every single word.
And honestly, I told Terrence before the wedding, a girl with no mama don't know how to be a wife. And look, I was right.
She chuckled softly. Something inside me cracked so deep I thought I'd never find the bottom of it. The following week, Terrence hosted a dinner at our house. His brother Dwayne was in town visiting from Memphis, and a few of Terrence's friends came over. I cooked. Of course I cooked. Jerk chicken rice and peas, plantains, coleslaw. Set the table nice. Put on a good face. Halfway through dinner, the conversation turned to real estate, property values in Atlanta, how the market was booming. And Terrence, with a mouth full of my food at my table in my house, looked around at his boys and said,
Rochelle thinks she's running things now that her grandma left her some property. Baby, sit down. The grown folks are talking.
He grinned, leaned back in his chair. The table laughed. Every single one of them. Dwayne looked down at his plate but said nothing. And I sat there with a smile frozen on my face, my fork in my hand, and my dignity bleeding out onto the floor. Nobody stood up for me, not one person. After everyone left, I washed the dishes alone. Terrence went to bed without saying goodnight. I stood at the sink, hands in soapy water, staring at my reflection in the dark window above the counter. And I barely recognized the woman staring back. The next day, Terrence started pushing again, harder this time. He came home with a manila folder, actual legal documents, and spread them on the kitchen table.
I need you to sign these. It adds my name to the deed on your grandmother's house.
No.
Rochelle?
No, Terrence. That house is in my grandmother's estate. I'm not adding anyone to anything until I've spoken to her attorney. He slammed his palm on the table. The salt shaker fell over and rolled to the floor.
You're being selfish. That's your problem. You've always been selfish. I've given you 5 years of my life and you can't even put my name on a piece of paper.
I didn't flinch. Not on the outside. But inside, every nerve in my body was on fire.
You better think real careful about what you're doing, Rochelle, because I know people. And I will get what's mine. One way or another.
Then he leaned in close, too close. He picked up the folder and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a long time after he left, my hands flat on the table, my heart hammering, my mind racing through every red flag I'd ignored, every warning Mika had given me, every look Grandma Odessa had given Terrence that I'd brushed off. That night, while Terrence was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost didn't look. Almost. But something pulled me. The same instinct that made me check the email. The same gut feeling that had been screaming at me for months while I kept telling it to shut up. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up with a text notification. The name wasn't his mother's. It wasn't his boss's. It wasn't anyone I knew. The name on the screen was Corinne. And the message read, I miss you, baby. When are you coming home tonight? Our bed is cold without you. Our bed. The room started spinning. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't feel anything except the phone in my hand and the words on the screen burning through my retinas like acid. Our bed. I set the phone down exactly where I found it, walked to the bathroom, sat on the floor with my back against the door, and pressed both hands over my mouth so he wouldn't hear me fall apart. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what I found next made that text message look like a love note. I didn't sleep that night, not a single minute. I lay next to Terrence in the dark, listening to him breathe, slow, steady, peaceful, like a man without a single thing weighing on his conscience. And I stared at the ceiling and replayed that text message over and over until the words stopped looking like English and started looking like a verdict. Our bed is cold without you. Our, not my, not the our. This wasn't a flirtation. This wasn't some woman shooting her shot. This was someone who lived with my husband, someone who had a bed that she considered theirs, together. The next morning, Terrence left for work at 6:15 like always, kissed my forehead at the door,
Have a good day, baby.
I smiled, said, "You too." And the second his truck pulled out of the driveway, I went straight for his laptop. He'd changed the password on his email. Of course he had. But he hadn't changed the password on his iCloud. Same one he'd used for years, the one I'd set up for him when he got his first iPhone because he couldn't figure it out himself. I opened his messages, and what I found in the next 45 minutes dismantled everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Terrence and Corinne had been involved for at least 8 months. 8 months. The messages went back to July of the previous year, 4 months before Grandma Odessa even passed. But the affair wasn't what destroyed me. Not really. It was what he said about me. In a message from September, Corinne asked, "Do you love her?"
I love what she's about to inherit. That's about it. Once I secure the property, I'm out. Just gotta play the long game.
Play the long game. I felt my stomach fold in on itself. I actually had to stand up and walk to the kitchen sink because I thought I was going to be sick. But I kept reading because I had to know everything. I had to see the full picture of the man I'd been sleeping next to for 5 years. In another message from November, the month Grandma Odessa passed, Corinne said, "I feel bad sometimes. She just lost her grandmother."
Don't feel bad for her. She's weak. Always has been. She thinks she's smart because she's got a degree, but she's clueless. Her grandma had to raise her because her own mama couldn't keep it together either.
I read that line 3 times. Her own mama couldn't keep it together. My mother died of cancer. She didn't choose to leave me. She fought for every single day she had, and when her body gave out, my grandmother stepped in and gave me everything. And this man I cooked, for this man I held in the dark. This man I believed when he said he loved me reduced my mother's death to weakness, to a punchline in a text to his mistress. I closed the laptop, walked to the bedroom, sat on the floor, and cried so hard my ribs ached. But there was more. Because there's always more when the truth starts unraveling. I checked our bank statements again. The $23,000 that Terrence said he invested in the business, I traced the transactions. 3 separate cashier's checks all made out to a property management company in Midtown. I searched the company name. It managed a luxury apartment complex on Juniper Street. Terrence had rented an apartment for Corinne. With our money. With money that sat in an account I contributed to every 2 weeks from my paycheck at Grady Memorial. He was funding a whole second life, and I was paying for it. That evening, Terrence came home whistling. He set his keys on the counter, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat down across from me like it was any other Tuesday.
What's wrong with you? You look tired.
I know about Corinne. The beer can stopped halfway to his mouth. For exactly 2 seconds, his eyes flickered, not with guilt, not with shame, but with calculation. Like he was running through options in his head. Then he set the can down and leaned back.
You went through my phone.
I know about the apartment, Terrence. I know about the money.
See, this is your problem, Rochelle. You're always snooping. Always looking for something to be upset about instead of just being grateful for what you have.
Grateful.
Yeah, grateful. I'm here, aren't I? I could have left a long time ago. But I stayed. I've been taking care of you through all this grief and emotional mess. And instead of appreciating that you go digging through my personal things like some kind of detective.
I stared at him, and in that moment I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man at the cookout who handed me a plate, not the man who fixed Grandma Odessa's porch, not the man who held me when she died. I saw a stranger, a con man in a husband costume. Who is she?
Nobody, it's nothing.
8 months is nothing. His jaw tightened. He stood up, pointed his finger at me.
You know what? You drive people away, Rochelle. That's what you do. You drove your friends away with your neediness. You suffocated me with your sadness. And now you want to sit here and act like the victim. Maybe if you spent less time crying over a dead old woman and more time being a wife, I wouldn't have had to go looking somewhere else.
A dead old woman. He called my grandmother the woman who raised me, who built everything with her bare hands, who loved me when the whole world fell away, a dead old woman. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there and felt something inside me go completely quiet, like a pilot light going out, like the last ember in a fire finally turning to ash. He grabbed his keys and walked out. The door slammed behind him, and I sat at that kitchen table in absolute silence, tears running down my face, my hands flat on the wood, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. I thought about Grandma Odessa, about what she would have said if she'd been sitting across from me instead of him. I could almost hear her voice.
Baby, I've already taken care of everything.
Everything. The next morning, I called attorney Lorraine Prescott. My voice was shaking, but my mind was clear. Mrs. Prescott, I need to see you. There are things happening that I need to understand what my grandmother left me. All of it. There was a pause on the other end. Then Lorraine's voice, calm and steady like a lighthouse through fog.
Honey, your grandmother was the smartest woman I ever knew. Come see me tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. There are things you need to know.
I drove to her office the next morning with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe there was a will, some paperwork, a few accounts to sort through. But what Lorraine showed me, what Grandma Odessa had done in the 2 years before she died, I sat there with my mouth open for a full minute. No words, no tears, just my mouth hanging open and my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Because my grandmother hadn't just left me an inheritance, she'd left me a weapon. Lorraine Prescott's office smelled like old leather and fresh coffee. She sat across from me with a thick folder on her desk, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, and her hands folded like a woman who'd been waiting a long time for this exact moment.
Rochelle, what I'm about to show you, your grandmother set this in motion 2 years before she passed. She came to me in the spring, sat right where you're sitting, and said,
Lorraine, I love my grandbaby, but I don't trust the man she married. And I need you to make sure he can't touch what I've built. Not one brick, not $1, not one blade of grass.
My throat tightened. 2 years. Grandma Odessa had seen it 2 years ago. Lorraine opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. The header read, Irrevocable Trust, Odessa Mae Whitmore Family Trust.
Your grandmother transferred all of her assets into an irrevocable living trust.
Lorraine explained.
The house on Lyndhurst Drive, the commercial lot on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and a savings account holding $127,000. You, Rochelle Elaine Whitmore, are the sole beneficiary. The trust is structured so that these assets cannot be touched, claimed, divided, or contested by a spouse, current or future, under any circumstances, not in a divorce, not in a lawsuit, not in probate court, nothing.
I stared at the paper. The words blurred in front of me. I blinked hard and 2 tears fell onto the page. She did this, for me.
She did this because she knew something might come. She told me, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She said,
That boy smiles too much when he looks at my house, and his mama measures my furniture with her eyes. I'm not leaving my Rochelle out in the cold because I was too polite to prepare for the worst.
I pressed my hand over my mouth. That was Grandma Odessa, right to the bone. Polite as Sunday morning, but sharp as a surgical blade when it mattered. Lorraine reached into the folder again and pulled out a cream-colored envelope sealed slightly yellowed with my name written on the front in my grandmother's careful cursive.
She left this with me 3 months before she passed.
Lorraine said, holding it gently.
Her instructions were very specific. Do not open this envelope until, and I'm quoting her directly,
Until the time is right. You'll know when, Lorraine. You'll know.
What's inside?
I don't know. I've honored her wishes. But Rochelle, when the time comes, I believe this envelope is meant to be opened in front of the people who need to hear what's inside.
Lorraine set the envelope back in the folder. I sat in that chair for a long time after Lorraine finished explaining the trust. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let it all wash through me. The betrayal, the grief, the rage, the love, the protection, the foresight of a 78-year-old woman who saw what I refused to see and built a wall around me anyway. Something inside me shifted in that office. Not broke, shifted. like a bone resetting after being out of place for too long. It hurt, but when it clicked into position, everything became clear. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't confused. I wasn't the woman crying on the bathroom floor. Something inside me went quiet, not sad quiet, dangerous quiet. I drove straight to Tamika's apartment in Buckhead. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and said,
"What happened?"
I told her everything. The affair, the money, the text from Corinne, the email to Vivian, the business card from Bradley Kincaid, and what Lorraine had just showed me. Mika sat on her couch with her hand over her chest, shaking her head slowly. Then she looked up at me with fire in her eyes.
"What do you need?"
I need your brain, Mika. You're a paralegal. You know how this works. I need to build a case so airtight that when I open the door, there's no way out for him.
Tell me everything again, slowly, from the beginning.
Mika was already reaching for her laptop. Over the next 2 weeks, Mika and I built a fortress of evidence. She helped me screenshot and print every text message between Terrence and Corinne, time-stamped, organized chronologically. We printed the bank statements showing the $23,000 in withdrawals and traced them to the apartment on Juniper Street. We pulled the lease agreement for that apartment. Terrence had signed it, using both our names, listing me as a co-tenant. I had never seen that lease. I had never agreed to it. My signature on the application was forged. But it got worse. Mika ran a search through public records and found something that knocked the air out of me. Terrence had taken out a personal loan for $15,000 from a credit union in Decatur, and he'd listed me as a co-borrower. My name, my social security number, my employer information, all on a loan I never signed, never agreed to, never even knew existed. Forgery. My husband had committed forgery twice.
Shalom,
Mika said quietly, looking at the documents spread across her dining table.
this isn't just divorce material. This is criminal.
I nodded. My jaw was set so tight my teeth ached. Through Lorraine, I was connected to a divorce attorney named Yolanda Frazier Sharp, experienced no nonsense. She reviewed everything in one meeting and said,
Mrs. Holloway, your husband made a lot of moves, but he made one critical mistake. He underestimated you, and he definitely underestimated your grandmother.
Yolanda filed a preliminary motion to freeze our joint accounts and began preparing the divorce petition. But she agreed with my plan. Don't file yet. Don't tip him off. Let him keep believing he's winning. Because that was the key. Terrence needed to feel invincible. He needed to walk into that lawyer's office with his chest puffed out and his mother on his arm, fully convinced that he was about to take everything. The higher he climbed, the harder he'd fall. So I went home, and I smiled. I cooked his meals. I asked about his day. I laughed at his jokes. Every morning I kissed him at the door and said, "Have a good day, baby." And every night I lay in bed next to a man I no longer recognized and counted down the days. Terrence told Vivian I'd calm down, that I was finally being reasonable.
I'm so glad you and Terrence are working things out, honey. Family is everything.
Vivian called me sweet as pecan pie. Yes, ma'am, it sure is. And I meant it, just not the way she thought. Terrence walked around the house like a man who'd already won. He whistled in the shower. He talked about our plans for the property. He even started looking at new trucks online, a $72,000 Ford F-250 Black, fully loaded, and said,
Once we get the estate sorted, I'm treating myself.
I smiled at him across the dinner table. He had no idea what was coming. Every smile I gave him was a countdown. Every yes, baby was a ticking clock. Every meal I cooked was a quiet act of patience from a woman who had finally stopped being afraid. And the clock was almost at zero. The meeting was Terrence's idea. That's the part that still makes me shake my head. 3 weeks after I'd sat in Lorraine Prescott's office learning about the trust, 3 weeks of smiling and cooking and pretending, Terrence came home one evening and announced like he was calling a board meeting that it was time to sit down with the estate lawyer and get this sorted once and for all. Or,
I've already talked to my attorney,
he said, setting his briefcase on the counter like a man closing a deal.
Bradley Kincaid. He specializes in estate disputes. He's going to make sure this is handled fairly.
Fairly. The word almost made me laugh. That's fine, I said, not looking up from the stove. I'll let Mrs. Prescott know.
Good, and Mama's flying in for it. She wants to be there to support me.
Of course she does, I thought. Vultures always travel in pairs. I called Lorraine that night. She listened, then said,
Good. Let them come. Let them bring whoever they want. We'll be ready.
Over the next week, the final pieces fell into place. Attorney Yolanda Frazier prepared a comprehensive evidence package, the forged loan documents, the bank withdrawal records, the traced payments to Corinne's apartment, the lease with my forged signature, and a printed time-stamped archive of every text message between Terrence and Corinne, including the ones where he called me baggage and said he was only staying for the inheritance. Lorraine had the trust documents ready, and the envelope, Grandma Odessa's sealed envelope, sat in Lorraine's desk drawer, waiting. I also made one more move, a quiet one. I called Dwayne Holloway, Terrence's older brother, the quiet one, the one who'd sat at my dinner table and looked down at his plate while his brother humiliated me in front of everyone. Dwayne, I need to send you something, and I need you to read it before the meeting.
Rochelle, I don't want to get in the middle of...
I'm not asking you to get in the middle. I'm asking you to see the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I emailed him a summary, not everything, but enough. The affair, the forged documents, the money, the texts. I didn't ask him to pick a side. I just asked him to open his eyes. He didn't respond, but he didn't delete it either. I'd find out later that he read it 3 times. The day of the meeting arrived on a Thursday in late April. The dogwoods were blooming all along West Paces Ferry Road, white and pink petals scattered across the sidewalks like confetti. A beautiful day, the kind of day that makes Atlanta look like it's showing off. I got dressed carefully that morning. Black slacks, cream silk blouse, my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones my mother wore before me, low heels, minimal makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time, a woman who was done being afraid. Tamika picked me up at 8:30. She was coming as my emotional support friend. That's what we told Terrence. In reality, she was a trained paralegal carrying a backup flash drive of every document in her handbag, ready to be a witness to whatever happened in that room. We arrived at Lorraine's office at 8:55. Lorraine was already there, calm as stone, the folder on her desk, the envelope beside it. Yolanda Frazier arrived 2 minutes later, tailored navy suit leather briefcase, the kind of presence that fills a room before she even speaks.
Are you ready?
Yolanda asked me. I've been ready, I said. Terrence and his crew arrived at 9:10, 10 minutes late, of course. He walked in first, charcoal suit, fresh haircut, cologne I could smell from across the room. He looked like a man walking into his own coronation. Behind him was Bradley Kincaid, early 50s, silver tie, confident handshake, the kind of lawyer who bills $400 an hour and makes sure you know it. And behind Kincaid, floating in like she owned the building, was Vivian Holloway, cream-colored dress, gold earrings, a leather handbag that probably cost more than my first car.
Good morning, Rochelle. I hope we can handle this like family.
She looked at me smiling. I smiled back. I hope so too, Miss Vivian. And then this, I didn't expect. Dwayne walked in, quietly, no announcement. He nodded at Terrence, nodded at me, and sat in a chair against the wall, slightly apart from everyone else. Terrence looked surprised, but didn't question it.
Good big bros here for support,
he said, clapping Dwayne's shoulder. Dwayne didn't smile. Everyone sat. Lorraine closed the door. Bradley Kincaid opened his briefcase and immediately took control, or tried to. He slid a stack of papers across the conference table and began his pitch. Mrs. Prescott, my client, Mr. Holloway, is the legal spouse of the sole heir to the Odessa Mae Whitmore estate. Under Georgia law, inherited assets that have been commingled with marital property used for joint benefit, maintained with joint funds, or otherwise integrated into the marital estate may be subject to equitable distribution. He paused for effect. Mr. Holloway is requesting 50% of the assessed value of the residence on Lyndhurst Drive, full ownership of the commercial lot on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and joint management rights over any financial accounts associated with the estate. 50% of the house, full ownership of the lot, joint management of the money. I looked at Terrence. He was leaning back in his chair, one ankle crossed over his knee arms folded, smiling. Vivian sat beside him, her chin tilted up, her hands folded in her lap like she was posing for a portrait.
Go ahead and cry, Rochelle. Cry all you want. When we walk out of here, everything your grandmother built and belongs to me.
That's right, baby.
Vivian patted his arm. The room was silent for a beat.
Are you finished, Mr. Holloway?
Lorraine Prescott didn't flinch as she removed her reading glasses and set them on the table.
Excuse me.
I asked if you're finished, because Mrs. Carter's grandmother left something for this exact occasion.
She reached to her right and picked up the cream-colored envelope, held it up so everyone could see the handwriting on the front. Just one word, Rochelle.
This envelope was entrusted to me by Odessa Mae Whitmore 3 months before her death. Her instructions were to open it when, and I quote, "the time is right."
She looked around the room. Her eyes settled on Terrence.
I believe the time is right.
Her fingers slid under the seal of the envelope. And in that moment, I saw something I'd never once seen on Terrence Darnell Holloway's face in 5 years of marriage. Fear. The room held its breath. Lorraine opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, like a woman who understood that timing was everything. She pulled out 3 documents and 1 handwritten letter, each one folded neatly, each one placed on the table like a card being laid down in a game that was already over. She picked up the first document.
This is a certified copy of the Odessa Mae Whitmore Irrevocable Family Trust, executed on March 14th, 2 years prior to Mrs. Whitmore's passing. Under this trust, the following assets were transferred out of Mrs. Whitmore's personal estate and into a protected irrevocable trust, the residence at 4817 Lyndhurst Drive, the commercial lot at 1203 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and a savings account currently holding $127,000. She looked at Bradley Kincaid. The sole beneficiary of this trust is Rochelle Elaine Whitmore. The trust is irrevocable. It cannot be contested, amended, or accessed by any party other than the named beneficiary. Under Georgia law, assets held in an irrevocable trust are not marital property. They are not subject to equitable distribution. They cannot be claimed by a spouse under any circumstances.
Bradley Kincaid's face went pale. He reached for the document, scanned it, flipped to the second page, then the third. His jaw tightened. He looked at Terrence, then looked away. Terrence's smile was gone. His arms unfolded. He sat up straight.
Hold on. That can't be right. We're married. Georgia is an equitable distribution state. I have rights.
You have rights to marital property, Mr. Holloway, Lorraine said calmly. These assets were never marital property. They were placed in trust before your wife ever inherited them. Your name appears nowhere in this document. Nowhere.
Lorraine picked up the second document.
This is a prenuptial agreement signed by you, Mr. Holloway, on October 3rd, 11 days before your wedding. In this agreement, you voluntarily waived all claims to any separate property inheritance or trust assets belonging to Rochelle Elaine Whitmore, both current and future.
The color drained from Terrence's face, completely, like someone had pulled a plug.
I never signed.
Page 4, Mr. Holloway. Your signature, witnessed and notarized.
Bradley Kincaid took the prenup and stared at the signature page. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he set the document down and leaned back in his chair like a man who just realized his client had walked him into a minefield. I remembered that day. Grandma Odessa had asked Terrence to sign some family paperwork at her kitchen table. She'd told him it was a standard document for estate planning purposes, just to keep things organized, baby. He'd signed it without reading it. Didn't even ask what it was. Just grabbed the pen, scrawled his name, and went back to watching football. He never read what he signed, and Grandma Odessa was counting on exactly that. Lorraine picked up the handwritten letter, the last item from the envelope. She unfolded it gently and read it aloud.
Baby, if Lorraine is reading this in front of people, then I was right about what I saw. I prayed I was wrong. Lord knows I did. But I watched that man look at this house the way a buyer looks at a listing, not the way a son looks at a home. And I watched his mother count my silverware when she thought I wasn't looking.
Lorraine's voice softened but didn't waver.
I didn't work 51 years so somebody could sweet-talk my grandbaby out of her birthright. Everything I built, every brick, every dollar, every late-night shift, it's yours, Rochelle. And no man, no court, no smooth-talking lawyer can take it from you. I made sure of that. I love you, baby. More than these words can hold. Stand tall. Your mama and I are watching. Grandma Odessa.
Tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't stop them. I didn't try, but my back was straight. My hands were steady and my eyes were open. The room was dead silent. Then attorney Yolanda Frazier stood up.
Mrs. Prescott, if I may.
Lorraine nodded.
Yolanda opened her briefcase and placed a second folder on the table. I represent Mrs. Whitmore in the matter of her divorce from Mr. Holloway, which has been filed as of this morning with the Fulton County Superior Court.
Terrence's head snapped toward me. Divorce, Rochelle, what?
Yolanda continued without pausing. In addition to the divorce petition, we are presenting the following evidence of financial misconduct and fraud committed by Mr. Holloway during the marriage.
She laid it all out, piece by piece. The $23,000 withdrawn from our joint savings. The traced payments to the apartment on Juniper Street leased for his mistress, Corinne. The personal loan for $15,000 taken out in both our names with my signature forged. The lease application for the apartment also forged. The complete archive of text messages between Terrence and Corinne confirming the affair, the financial scheming, and his stated intent to leave the marriage after securing my inheritance. Each document landed on the table like a hammer blow. Terrence's hands started shaking, first his fingers, then his whole hands. He reached for his water glass and knocked it over. Water spread across the table, soaking into Bradley Kincaid's legal pad. Nobody moved to clean it up.
This is you can't, Rochelle, baby, listen to me.
His voice cracked. That same voice that had barked at me across the kitchen table. That same voice that had called my grandmother a dead old woman. That same voice that had told his mistress I was clueless. Now it was cracking like a boy caught stealing. Vivian hadn't moved. She sat frozen in her chair, her mouth slightly open, her gold earrings catching the light as her head trembled, almost imperceptibly. For the first time since I'd known Vivian Holloway, she had absolutely nothing to say.
Yolanda looked at Bradley Kincaid. Counselor, I trust you'll advise your client that forgery is a felony in the state of Georgia. We have not yet decided whether to pursue criminal charges, but that option remains on the table.
Kincaid didn't respond. He just closed his briefcase, quietly, like a man packing up a losing case.
Dwayne stood up from his chair against the wall. Everyone turned. He looked at Terrence for a long, hard moment. Then he shook his head. You're on your own, little brother? Mama raised you wrong, and I'm done covering for both of y'all.
He walked out of the room without looking back. The door clicked shut behind him. Terrence turned to me. His eyes were wet. His shoulders were hunched. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him look.
Rochelle, please, I'm sorry, I'll change. I swear to God I'll change. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Please.
I looked at him. I really looked at him. At the man I'd loved. The man I'd trusted. The man I'd built a life with. And I felt something I didn't expect. Nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even sadness, just nothing. Like looking at a stranger on the street. You're not sorry, Terrence, I said. My voice was steady, calm, mine. You're just sorry you got caught. I stood up, straightened my blouse, touched my grandmother's pearl earrings with my fingertips. And one more thing. I looked at him. Remember when you said I was nothing without you managing things? Turns out Grandma Odessa managed everything just fine, without you. I turned to Lorraine. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott, for keeping your promise to my grandmother.
Lorraine nodded. Her eyes were glistening. It was my honor, sweetheart.
I walked out of that office and into the Atlanta sunshine. Tamika was right beside me. She didn't say anything. She just put her arm through mine, and we walked down Peachtree Street while the dogwood petals floated around us like snow in April. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. 6 months. That's how long it took to close the chapter of Terrence Darnell Holloway. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in October, almost exactly 5 years to the day from our wedding. Poetic, isn't it? The judge reviewed the evidence, the trust documents, the prenuptial agreement, and the record of financial fraud. Terrence's attorney, Bradley Kincaid, barely put up a fight. There wasn't much to fight with. The ruling was straightforward. All assets held within the Odessa Mae Whitmore Irrevocable Family Trust, the house on Lyndhurst Drive, the commercial lot on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, and the $127,000 savings account remained solely and entirely mine. Terrence had no claim, not 1 cent, not 1 square foot, not 1 blade of grass, just like Grandma Odessa had promised. The $23,000 he'd withdrawn from our joint savings was ordered to be repaid in full plus interest. The $15,000 personal loan he'd taken out using my forged signature was dismissed from my credit, and the full liability was transferred to him alone. Our house in East Point was sold, and the equity was split, though. By the time Terrence's debts and legal fees were subtracted from his half, he walked away with barely enough to cover first and last month's rent on a 1-bedroom apartment in College Park. But the law wasn't finished with him. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office picked up the forgery case. 2 counts the loan application and the apartment lease. Terrence's public defender tried to negotiate, but the evidence was overwhelming. He pled guilty to both counts and received 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent felony on his record. That felony meant he couldn't pass a background check. His construction firm let him go within the week. The last I heard, he was doing odd jobs for a handyman service in South Fulton, driving a 10-year-old pickup truck that rattled every time it hit a pothole. The $72,000 Ford F-250 he'd been dreaming about. He couldn't finance a bicycle. And Corinne, the woman whose bed was cold without him, she disappeared the moment the money dried up. Blocked his number the day after the meeting at Lorraine's office, the apartment on Juniper Street. She moved out within the month. I guess our bed wasn't worth much without our money to keep the lights on. Vivian Holloway flew back to Memphis the day after the meeting, and from what Dwayne told me later, she didn't leave her house for 3 weeks. The woman who'd measured my grandmother's furniture with her eyes and called me a girl with no mama, she sat alone in her living room in Memphis with the curtains drawn, calling Terrence over and over, getting sent to voicemail. Dwayne stopped answering her calls too.
I love my mother Rochelle, but I can't respect what she did, and I won't pretend I can.
Dwayne and I stayed in touch. Not close, we weren't going to be best friends. But he sent me a message a few months after the divorce that said,
Your grandmother was a real one. I'm sorry my family didn't deserve the grace she gave us.
I appreciated that, more than he probably knows. Now let me tell you about the good part. Because there is a good part, and it's the part that matters most. 2 months after the divorce was final, I moved into Grandma Odessa's house on Lyndhurst Drive, Cascade Heights, the house she bought with cash in 1979, the house she raised me in, the house that still had her scent in the curtains and her handwriting on the recipe cards in the kitchen drawer. I didn't change much. I painted the guest bedroom, replaced the carpet in the hallway with hardwood, fixed the back porch again because Georgia weather doesn't care about sentiment. But the kitchen, I didn't touch the kitchen. That was her room. The yellow tile backsplash she picked out herself, the cast iron skillet hanging above the stove, the little ceramic rooster on the windowsill she'd had since before I was born. I left it all exactly the way she had it. Some mornings when the light comes through the kitchen window just right, I swear I can smell her cooking. Bacon and biscuits and strong black coffee. And I stand there for a moment, eyes closed, and just breathe. The commercial lot on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, the one Vivian and Terrence had salivated over. I turned it into something Grandma Odessa would have been proud of. I partnered with a community health organization and opened a pharmacy. Not a chain, not a corporate franchise. A real independent community pharmacy that serves the neighborhood affordable prescriptions, health screenings, diabetes, education, blood pressure checks. The kind of place where people walk in and feel seen. I named it Odessa's Pharmacy. The sign went up on a Saturday morning, gold letters on a deep green background. I stood on the sidewalk with Tamika beside me, both of us looking up at that sign, and I cried. Not the crying I did on the bathroom floor, not the crying I did at Grandma Odessa's bedside. This was different. This was the kind of crying that happens when something broken finally becomes something beautiful.
Your grandma's smiling right now, Shell. I know she is.
I think she's right. These days my life is quiet, and I mean that as the highest compliment I can give it. I work at the pharmacy 3 days a week and at Grady the other 2. I sit on Grandma Odessa's porch every evening with a cup of chamomile tea and watch the sun go down over Cascade Heights. The oak trees she loved are still standing. The neighbors still bring plates. And on Sundays, I cook. Just for me. Smothered pork chops, collard greens, cornbread from scratch. I put on Frankie Beverly and Maze, and I dance in my kitchen alone, and it doesn't feel lonely. It feels free. Cousin Nadine comes over every other weekend. She always says the same thing when she walks through the door. This house feels like Miss Odessa never left. And I always say the same thing back. She didn't. I'm not angry at Terrence anymore. I'm not anything at Terrence anymore. He's a chapter I closed, a lesson I learned, and a name I gave back. I went to the courthouse and legally reclaimed my grandmother's name, Whitmore, Rochelle Elaine Whitmore, the name I was born with, the name that means something. Last month, I was closing up the pharmacy on a Friday evening. The sun was setting over MLK Boulevard, casting long golden shadows across the sidewalk. An older woman I didn't recognize walked past, stopped, and looked up at the sign. She turned to me and said, "Odessa's Pharmacy." That's a beautiful name. Was Odessa someone special? I smiled. Yes, ma'am, she was everything. My name is Rochelle Elaine Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, and I am exactly who my grandmother raised me to be. Sometimes the people who protect us the most are the ones who do it so quietly we don't even realize it until they're gone. If someone loved you that hard, a grandmother, a mother, a friend, hold on to that. And if you're going through something right now that feels like it's breaking, you just know sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning of who you were always meant to be. Drop a comment and tell me who's your Grandma Odessa, who loved you when the world didn't. Subscribe if this story touched your heart, and I'll see you in the next one.